All right, folks, welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation. Folks, I'm going to share with you just a little bit about the latest coming out of Tennessee, where they now have revealed that there was some leaked audio of Tennessee GOP leaders conspiring and complaining about being called racist. We'll share a little bit of that with you. Also, we're going to have a very, very big conversation, a special one, talking about the state of Black America, the state of young people of Black America. We're going to be checking in with some dynamic leaders and having your say as well as we talk about what's going on with the next generation. And then later on, I'm going to be checking in and talking about the WIN conference, a very, very powerful conference of entrepreneurs and women. So we'll have that discussion. So stay with us. A lot to get to on today's edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Let's go. All right, folks, welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation. Folks, I want to just take a few moments in the beginning of the show to talk about another development in the case of the Tennessee Three, and more importantly, in the case of what's going on in the House down in the state of Tennessee and what's going on with Tennessee GOP leaders. There has been a leaked audio that has come out, folks, as a result of this situation of the expulsion of those two Black lawmakers, Representative Justin Jones and Representative Justin Pearson. The Tennessee Holler, which is a media outlet down there, had posted some leaked audio of some of the conversation behind the scenes and within the back doors of the Tennessee House, as Tennessee GOP leaders have come out and talked about their decision to expel the two lawmakers, as well as them complaining about being called racist. I want to share with you just a little bit of what we got here from the audio, and then get your take on this. But tomorrow, I want us to dedicate some more time, if not tomorrow, sometime this week, to look at this case. And then there's the other case out of Oklahoma, where those Oklahoma lawmakers, those GOP lawmakers, complain about not being able to lynch Black people. There is a serious problem, folks, that we're having among representatives, especially among white representatives, who are saying these things, and there aren't really any laws to prevent their service. This is the situation we also saw here in Los Angeles, where some city council members made some disparaging and racist comments about Black residents, and yet they are, outside of them, making a decision to resign, there isn't any way that we can get folks removed off of these governing bodies. And essentially, we're stuck with, because of the lack of laws to cover audio and this type of hateful rhetoric, it opens up the door for poor leadership for communities that are in dire need of better leadership. All right, let me just share with you this excerpt coming from the Tennessee Holler. This is a group of GOP Tennessee lawmakers. Take a look. Take a listen.
I think now, more than ever, everyone should recognize that Democrats are not our friends. I listened for the last 3 days to Democrats, Sam McKenzie, the Chisholm, Parkinson, trash us as racist. I've never had anybody call me a racist. And for the last 3 days, all I have heard from them is how this is the most racist place. One of these white supremacists. Good Lord, we have to realize they are not our friends. They can smile, man, that doesn't mean I can't be polite to them, but they are not our friends. They destroy the republic and the foundation of who we are, or we preserve it. That is the reality where we are right now. And if these last 3 days have not proven that, you need to find a new job. There has never been a more important time for us to be unified. There are 75 of us. Let them call everything of the names they're going to call. Then we need to move forward. We need to pass the gun bill. We need to pass the pronoun bill, wherever Mark is. Man, we do not slow down because of their crap. We can't. The only way we move forward with some sort of unity is to call out what happened on the House floor the other night. Yes, sir. I feel like we were hung out to dry by a couple of members. And Jody, I'm just gonna say it here because you signed the letter. You straight up came to me and said you were 100% where I was. And you went on the House floor and you did the opposite. Man, you hung us out to dry. And I like you personally. This is not personal. And if Brian Terry was here, I'd say the same thing to him. This would have been bad anyway, but good God, we brought the racism into it because you didn't stay with us. But I need to know, and I don't want to hear why there wasn't a preponderance of evidence and an attorney. I need to know why you flipped your vote at the last minute. You didn't let them know beforehand. Giving Johnny a 15-minute heads up doesn't cut it. And if Brian Terry was here, I want to hear from him too. I have to know.
We're gonna kick the staff out. This is the place to say, I haven't lied to anybody, not one time. It pisses me off to suggest that I have, and some of my friends in here suggested that I lied, and that's bullcrap. I walked into that room to vote to expel all three of them, just like all y'all. And the letter that I sent to the speaker, it says exactly what it says. Throw the book at it. Everything you got. It doesn't say expulsion. It's not in there. But doesn't matter. I was ready. But hold on. I was ready. I was walking into that room ready to vote before we ever started on Jones. I got a list of questions from Johnny Garrett. Johnny says, you're on the list that the speaker has to ask questions. Sat there through Jones, made notes. I went to Johnny and said, Johnny, can I go off script? Johnny says, yeah, go for it. Speaker never called me. We voted. I hit the green vote because that's what I'm there for. Then we get into the floor again, and immediately the questions start coming up about the resolution. I know what she did. I know that she did break the rules, and I know that she deserves to be expelled. We got to do it right, and that wasn't right. While this is going on, Reader came to my desk and said, hey, you think we're doing good? I said, no, we haven't established the case. Gino's had 2 cracks at her, and the only thing he's established is that she stood at the well. That's it. Didn't fix any of the problems with the resolution. He didn't establish that she'd been here 10 years, 12 years, and knew the book better than others did. Why were we still in session? Because we're in between bills. Why did you get gavelled out of order? Because the speaker had to get order. Was disorderly conduct and caused chaos in this whole place. That line of questioning is exactly what I told the leader I needed to ask, because we don't have it right now. He didn't sit there and say, you need to vote yes anyway. He didn't whip my vote. He walked off. He didn't go to the speaker and tell the speaker to call on me. So if you're all going to come all at me and single me out, and only 3 of y'all call me this weekend to check on me, I'm going to defend myself. I told leadership what was going on. I told them I had problems. I had questions. I had a plan to fix it. When the question got called, I went to Johnny. I said, Johnny, do we have the votes? He said, well, nobody else changes their vote. We should be fine. Why are you not going to vote yes? And I explained it. And I went back to my desk. I sat there and had my internal debate on what to do. Then the bell rang. I'm concerned that I'm going to vote yes on a resolution that I know is wrong. We didn't establish that she did all that other stuff. All we established is she walked from there to there. As much as I hate to get John Ray any credit for anything, the smartest thing he said the whole season I've been up here. Darren Jernigan in the back of the room says, we can't vote on a resolution that's totally drafted. And he's right. Ignore that we were screwing it up and put my name on something that I knew that was going to be in the annals of history as being wrong. No different than some Democrat is going to be on a jury for Donald Trump.
So the leaked audio is actually 9 minutes long. We just don't have enough time to share it with you today, but this speaks volumes about where we are in the quote unquote our republic. The voices that you heard were GOP leadership, Mr. Zachary, Mr. Barrett, Mr. Lamberth, Mr. Garrett, and Mr. Sapicki. And Zachary is the one that is doing a lot of the talking, saying, please forgive me if my comments do not come off Christ-like, do not come off as Christ-like. These are representatives for the state of Tennessee, GOP representatives for the state of Tennessee. And these are the folks that have power. And they're talking like this, saying that they had to be racist if certain persons would go along complaining about racism. And folks, the unfortunate part about this whole thing is the simple fact that this is not an isolated incident. As this came out today, we heard we got word, and it's all across the news, that in Oklahoma, GOP representatives in Oklahoma complained about not being able to lynch Black people. The Oklahoma governor, who is a Republican, Governor Stitt, has decided to call for the resignation of those individuals who were involved in this leaked audio. He has called for the Oklahoma Department of Investigation to investigate. The Sheriff's Department to investigate, even though it was shared that through a statement with the Sheriff's Department that the audio may have been obtained illegally, which opens the door for this audio to not be used in any type of court proceeding, or it may open the door for this audio to not be even a part of any real investigative substantial case against these GOP leaders. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, the situation here in Los Angeles of those council people, those Latino council people who conspired on how they can hold on to power at the expense of Black residents, saying very disparaging words, tone, the whole nine, folks. We're seeing this time and time again. And so there has to be something that needs to be done. Unfortunately, you cannot get fired from your job in a lot of these jurisdictions for just stating something, unless your statement leads to some illegal action or something happening. But if you express yourself, even as a elected official, it doesn't warrant you to be removed from office. And the case in Los Angeles, it said that, because even though these terms were disparaging and the tone and the whole rhetoric was just disheartening, one of the council persons, there were three that were involved in the situation. One is still on the council for Los Angeles City. So what are we looking at here? Again, we don't have a lot of time to go into it today, but I'm just kind of laying out the foundation of a larger discussion that needs to happen. That we as Black people in this country, we need to really think about what's happening here. And the other part of it is to advocate that if you use this type of rhetoric to and you are sitting in a position of power and influence and have access to resources, and essentially you are dictating the futures of so many people's lives, this should automatically disqualify you from service. Automatically. So I'm just bringing that to our attention. God willing, later on this week, we will get further into the conversation. But this is what's happening in Tennessee. This is what's happening in Oklahoma. We heard about it in Los Angeles, and I'm sure other states across this country where this type of racism is happening around the country, behind closed doors, among leadership. And yet, Black people in particular are told to be faithful, to continue to support the system, to continue to hold fast. We will get those bad apples out, when this has been a part of the American political system for years. Smile in your face, talk behind your back, and do nothing for you for your interest. Look, I got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, we're going to shift gears. We're going to talk about the state of Black youth in America, a big conversation with some fantastic folks. I want y'all to be with me. Stay with me. We're kicking it off today here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
We feel the hidden impacts of climate change that land harder in Black, Brown, and Native communities.
Not many people talk about it because they clearly don't know our lives. But with President Biden's landmark infrastructure and climate plans, our issues are finally seen.
Removing lead pipes means we know our water is safe. Cutting carbon pollution helps our kids breathe easier. 1.5 million new jobs means stable work in communities. The impact we need.
Right now.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. Good to hear from you. Good to have you join us for the conversation. We're going to switch gears. Again, we're going to have a much more in-depth and larger conversation around the issue of poor leadership, racist leadership, and leaked audios. We're going to focus on that over these next couple of days, God willing, so we can get a better sense of how we should move forward from this situation. But now I wanted us to switch gears for us to have a much deeper conversation about what's going on with the state of Black youth here in this country. Yesterday, we talked about what was coming out of the National Urban League State of Black America, a report that they put out over the weekend, where they talked about democracy in peril. Well, today, I thought that it would be appropriate for us to have a deeper conversation about the generational challenges that we're facing right now. Because we can talk about democracy, we can certainly talk about what's happening around everything else. But let me just tell you what really is the key of all of this. What is going to be the key to the future? It's not going to be policy. It's not going to be candidates. The real key of the future are young people, is the youth. That's the key of the future, folks. If young people in this country, particularly Black youth, are not in a position of power, if they're not in a position where they can have access to resources and access to opportunities, if they're not in a position to create, if they're not in a position to express themselves, then what's going to be our future? Because we're not going to be around forever. We all know that. But we do know that we need to have some serious discussions about the investment into the next generation. And that's why we wanted to have this conversation today. And I'm so very happy to have these dynamic leaders joining me for the discussion as we're talking about the state of Black youth in America. Let me first share a little bit about each one of these guests. We have been joined by Miss Alicia Lee, who serves as the president of the Baltimore Children and Youth Fund. Ms. Lee is going to give us some more details about the work of BCYF and the things that they're doing in my hometown of the great city of Baltimore. We're also joined by my brother, Dr. Marco Clark, who serves as the founder and CEO of the Richard Wright Schools. We've had a dynamic conversation with Dr. Clark before, and I'm very excited to have my brother back joining us for the conversation. And then we also have Pastor Dr. Roma Benjamin, who serves as the pastor and founder of the Roma J. Benjamin Ministries and Greater Faith Ministries. Listen to the folks that we got here, folks. We're going to talk about arts and culture. We're going to talk about education. We're going to talk about faith and spirituality. And I want to hear from you as we have these dynamic leaders joining me for this conversation about the state of Black youth in America. Join us as you post your comments on our YouTube chat, Facebook chat, as we're streaming live on Black Star Network, and of course on Amazon News, because we would certainly love to hear from you. All right, let me bring in my fantastic panelists for today. And I appreciate each and every one of you for joining us this afternoon. First, let me start with you, Alicia. Miss Lee, you work in my home city, Baltimore City, Baltimore
That's right.
Children.
The best city in the country.
The best city in the country.
That's right. That's right. And I know
talk a little bit about
work here.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's talk about this, because the space that you come out of is the fine art space, arts and culture, really looking at the other side, not talking about, performance, but more importantly, how to create artistic and creative opportunities for the next generation. But talk about the work of BCYF and what's and the impact that you guys are looking to make in Baltimore.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for letting me be here today. It's great to be with another Baltimorean, maybe a Ravens fan, maybe.
Right. Oh, yeah, I'm a Ravens fan.
Okay, good. Awesome. It's great to be here. Thank you for bringing up the fact that I'm an artist, because I think that's really important, because now I work in philanthropy, and those two things don't feel connected always, but they absolutely are. My work and my artistic work, my work as an educator has always been about liberatory practices for Black young people, for making space for them to create. Lucille Clifton reminds us that we can't imagine, we can't create what we can't imagine. And so for me, arts education is another vehicle to employ young people in the business of creating and making their imagination and their thoughts reality. And so in philanthropy, I feel like we're doing the same thing, right? We are just one tool that young people and the adults that engage with them can use, financial resource, and also knowledge and connection. We are just one tool that folks can use to create the city that they imagine. So BCWF, the Baltimore Children and Youth Fund, was created in 2015. A dynamic group of thought leaders got together following the uprisings after the murder of Freddie Gray and decided that they were going to make sure that there was a policy change in the city as a result of this latest incident, of course, of police brutality in our city. And so the Baltimore Children and Youth Fund was put to ballot throughout the city. 80% of our city voted to create the fund, making Baltimore a city that made a dynamic investment saying, we are all responsible. We're going to put our money where our mouth is. We are all responsible for the safety and well-being of our children. And so here we are now many years later, and we are an organization that invests in programs in the city that are community accountable and youth specific. So really helping to make sure that the outcomes that community residents decide are important, making sure that the programs that community residents decide are important are the ones that are funded first. Thinking about the folks, when we think about risk and return on investment, we think about the folks who have taken the most risk by placing their bodies and in some cases their time, right, at the forefront of making sure that young people have access to programs, reading, math, dance, singing, chess, whatever excites a young person's imagination.
Yeah.
And really allowing them to, like we allow for young people, as our dream for all young people, that young people are able to leverage their interests to build relationships and to learn and grow and thrive. And so that's the work of the Baltimore Children and Youth Fund. And I'm excited to say too, we try to defy all the odds philanthropically. So, in the national picture, Black and Brown led organizations only account for about 4% of the philanthropic sector, especially pre-2020, right? And in Baltimore, at the Baltimore Children Youth Funds, 91% of our grantees are Black and Brown-led organizations. So being able to disperse about $18 million over the last 4 years and an annual amount of anywhere between $8 and $10 million into the youth development sector in Baltimore City, mostly into the hands of Black and Brown people, that's the work of BCYF.
No, that's awesome. That is awesome. I want to bring my brother, Dr. Marco Clark, allow him to kind of share his opening remarks on this because, you know, to your point, Alicia, when we're talking about young people, you know, fine arts, arts and culture are generally put in the back. And I think that, you know, it doesn't make sense because I know the power of arts that it has on me. I went to Baltimore School for the Arts. And so that's the same place that Jada Pinkett went, that Tupac went when they were young. So arts changed my life. I probably wouldn't even be in media if it wasn't for the arts, right? As I was studying to be an actor. So all of those things play a huge role. And I tell people, arts is one of the best ways to get children, the next generation, off the street from violent situations. I mean, if they're involved, and I'm talking about art in a very broad sense, performing arts, you know, whether you're a visual artist, you're a musical artist, whatever the case may be, there has to be a serious investment in the arts if we're talking about saving Black youth in this country. Let me bring my brother, Dr. Marco Clark, in, who serves as the founder and the CEO of the Richard Wright Schools. And Dr. Clark, it's always good to hear from you, brother. I'm glad that we were able to reconnect with you today. Talk to us about the work that you're doing from the education space, because as much as we have these conversations about school systems, you know, you and the team that you're working with, you was able to step out there on faith and to establish an alternative to what we are used to. And it's a model that I think that should be duplicated in states across this country. So we got a couple of moments before we take our first pause, but talk to us about the work of the Richard Wright Schools.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be back. I appreciate your voice. We need you. Continue doing this work, man. So glad to be on here with some esteemed colleagues to talk this work.
Thank you.
I'll share with you the work that we do at Richard Wright Schools. We are the only journalism and media art school in the entire country that's on a high school level. And we are serving kids in grades 8 through 12. We're creating the next journalists, those who are going to be like you, those individuals who are going to be behind, because we got to train young people to be able to tell the true story. Because as we see what's happening right now is that stories are being sidelined by these powerful networks, and the information is being so misleading and it's bleeding into our communities. And you see the examples of what's happening. When you get bad information, then the whole community is on fire. And our community is on fire right now. We talk about people want to give back, but what about mentoring up? We want to talk about, you know, people are giving back, but what about just being able to be right there to show a kid that you can become who I am? And so the work that we're doing in DC, we are changing communities one person at a time, and we're branching out. And now we're looking at some other options where people are asking us to bleed this over into their state so we can get this work done.
No, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. And you know, the work of establishing a school system, how did you go about that? How was that started? Just to give us a little tidbit of that process.
I worked in a larger school district, and I got tired of seeing our kids being used as pawns. I got tired of them being the dollars, count up the dollars without educating them, without nurturing them, without providing a strong support. And so I decided to step out on faith because I felt like, quite frankly, I could do it better. And so this charter school thing came about. I got a dynamic team together who understood finances, curriculum, and facilities. And we put that all together along with a group, dynamic group of board of trustees who would serve our students and serve the community. And we decided that we could do it better. So we opened up this school in DC. And when we got our charter, now we've been open for 14 years, which is a big deal on a charter school level for secondary, because they like to shut the doors. But our students have been able to interview people like the late Congressman John Lewis and Jesse Jackson and Michelle Obama. Our kids have been in spaces that never would have happened without me stepping out on faith. And I'm encouraging us, the charter school realm, no matter what nobody says, is the fixer to educating Black and brown children across this country, because it gives them a voice to own their education, and it gives parents an opportunity to be a part of something that's functioning different than the pawns that they're creating in these districts.
Look, we're going to take a quick pause. Man, oh man, y'all can hear the power coming out. And I ain't even had a chance to introduce our final panel special guest, Dr. Roma Benjamin. So we're going to get to her in a moment. But folks, I want y'all to be a part of the discussion as well, because no conversation is complete without you. Join us in the discussion. Post your comments on Facebook and YouTube as we talk about the state of Black youth in America. Stay with us. A lot more to cover here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Pull up a chair. Take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Farajii Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I am about to jump into a dynamic conversation with some fantastic leaders. We're talking about the state of Black youth in America. And joining me are three dynamic leaders that represents different factions of our society. From education, we got Dr. Marco Clark. From the fine arts and culture space, we have my sister, Miss Alicia Lee. And now from the faith and spirituality realm, we have Dr. Roma Benjamin, who's going to talk to us about the work that she's doing and why it's important for young people to have an understanding of their spirituality. So Dr. Roma, Pastor Roma, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. Talk to us about your ministries and the work that it makes on the next generation, Pastor.
Well, hello to everyone, and thank you so much for having me. And Dr. Clark is my very dear friend, and I'm so glad to be on with him. I'm here in Pennsylvania and not far from Maryland, so Alicia, you might be seeing me because I'm very much interested in the arts for our young people. I do pastor, but I don't pastor your traditional congregation. I pastor leaders. I pour into leaders, and I'm also an educator. I'm the director of curriculum and instruction in a private boys' school here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I've been principal on every level in the city of Harrisburg. And my heart is really to be able to see our children read. Our Black and brown children are the ones who do not get sufficient reading instruction. They're given standardized tests that has nothing to do with almost anything in the world that they live in. And they are let's say they are graded by that. And so I've I've done in my church, with my church, I wouldn't pastor a church that was illiterate. I made the congregation know that immediately. So I opened up, I'm like Dr. Clark. I felt I could do better than the school system. And I've been in the school system over 25 years. I opened up a literacy center just to deal with illiteracy in the schools, in the church, in the daycares, just to deal with it in the communities, to give children an opportunity, as well as parents. I was working with parents too, to bring about a paradigm shift in education, because our children suffer, especially young men. They're classified as emotional support, or they're classified as behavior problems, and they're technically not. And I've always said the bottom line is they can't read, and especially on their grade level. So I do a lot of work within the schools and within the churches. I go in to help pastors reform and restructure their churches. So it's not just church as usual. We are very unique in how we handle this and where we go, and wherever I am led by the Lord, that's where I'm going. So right now I'm just encouraged, and I'm glad to be on with such great men and women. And thank you for having me.
Absolutely, Pastor Roma. Let's talk a little bit about this because we're seeing young people. I'm going to start this with you, Dr. Clark. We see so many stories, and we've been seeing a number of stories about young people being in a state of dysfunction, and you know, especially in the school system. I mean, I'm recalling that there have been the attitudes about public schools has changed dramatically, especially among Black folks in this country. And, you know, 30, 40 years ago, you know, the mantra was coming from, you know, our grandparents and great grandparents: go to school, get a strong education, and make a way for yourself, do something good in the world. But that doesn't seem to be the case nowadays. It seems like the idea of going to school and, more importantly, making an impact on the world seems to have been diminished by so many different things. And I want to kind of get your take on, you know, do you think that we have the proper attitude right now to take education seriously? Or is it just because the educational system has essentially failed us because it's not producing, it's not speaking to who we are as, not just as Black people, but who we are as human beings, to cultivate us to the point to get us ready for what the future may hold for us?
Wow, man, that let me tell you, I got so much to say. We're in a state of dysfunctionality, and it starts at home. A lot of folks like to blame the schools and the school system, but the parent is the first teacher. The parent was the first teacher, and you know, parents got to get in the game. You know, our kids are running wild, and I hate to say that, but we got to tell the truth about our Black and brown children. Many of them are running wild because they do not have the support at home. Parents are complaining, fighting. There's a rise of parents threatening teachers and administrators. There's a rise of where teachers are feeling unsafe to walk to their cars. They're unsafe to take these cell phones that are diminishing with social media. Everything is working against us. That's why education is not being taken away as serious as it should be. I wrote a book, and it got criticized several years ago, called "Parents, Where Are You? The Kids Are Out of Control." Well, all of that is coming to fruition now. But we're seeing that the kids are running meetings. When you have a meeting with certain parents, the kids can come in for a conference with the parent, but they're actually having the conference with you. We are going to have to start putting some onus on it. The politicians don't want to say it because they need the parents to vote, but we got to hold them accountable for this. You got this philanthropy groups that are giving money to education. They're pouring money in. During the COVID, we saw millions of dollars go into education, and yet we're seeing an outcome that is not paying exactly what we saw pour into it. It's time for us to really take a stance with that. You're going to lose the educators who have been trained, those who went to school to do this. And the reason they're not stepping in is not because they don't have the desire. They're not stepping in because of the other ills that will create issues for them. And they're saying, hey, why should I have to fight with, literally fight with a parent or be cursed out by a parent when all I'm trying to do is to do what I got educated to do, and that's help the Black community, help Black and brown children. We have got to make a culture shift to work through this. Now, there are some great parents out there, and let me not cast an aspersion on every parent, because I have some dynamic parents, but we need more. And there's not going to be enough educators like Dr. Clark and Dr. Roma to be able to take on this particular situation. It's important for us to get in the game.
It's crazy because we're seeing more stories. You know, I'm thinking about the 6-year-old that shot at the teacher. I'm thinking about, you know, out here in LA, we just had a major strike that shut down schools, some of the LA public schools, for 3 days because of the support staff felt like they're not getting paid enough. We already know that conversation as it relates to the primary providers, such as teachers, saying that they're not getting paid enough. And as much as Dr. Clark, as much as we say that children are the future, we sure don't give a lot of investment to those who are responsible for shaping that future. We don't put a lot of money into that, into their pockets. And I'm not even talking about, you don't need to spend millions of dollars, you know, paying teachers like we do ball players. But I'm talking about livable wages, brother, that aren't being spent. And I want to get your take on that. And then we got to take a quick pause. But then I wanted my sister Alicia to talk about that as well in terms of that level of investment. But we don't pay teachers enough.
Yeah.
And to put up with the BS of parents and students.
We do not pay them enough. And I'll say in the District of Columbia, we have teachers and educators who cannot live in DC. They cannot live there because they can't afford to live there. We expect them to spend hours upon hours, but we don't give them the living wage that we need to actually make it happen. And this is not just DC. This is across the country that we're not looking at the fact that educators are responsible for every career. And so if you don't invest in the individuals who are going to take on every career, then that means you're going to have poor doctors, bad police, bad EMT, bad construction workers, bad everything. So what does our future look like if you don't want to invest? And if we don't have parents who are holding children accountable for being in the house at 9 o'clock when you're 12? If we don't have lawmakers who are pushing and saying, hey, this cannot happen, get your behind in, parents, I'm going to hold you responsible. We got to get some living wages out there. Listen, everybody's going to run from education. We saw during the pandemic, when there are no educators, the parents didn't want to support those kids at home. And we saw what the country went into, a crisis when you don't have educators working. Schools are fundamentally important. Our society can't function without us. And I don't know why somebody in that political realm hasn't said we need to pay our educators the way they deserve to be paid.
Absolutely. All right, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, Lisa, I want to get your take on that. Of course, Dr. Roma, I want to get your take as an educator. And folks, I want to hear from you. Crew, join us in the conversation. Post your comments, crew, post your thoughts, and let's continue to have the robust conversation about the state of Black youth in America right here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is roland@rolandsmartin.com.
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. We've been having a fantastic conversation talking about the state of Black youth in America. We've been joined by some dynamic leaders. I'm joined by Miss Elisa Lee, who serves as the president of the Baltimore City Children and Youth Fund. I'm also joined by Dr. Marco Clark, who serves as the founder and CEO of the Richard Wright Schools. And I'm also joined by Dr. Roma Benjamin, who is the founder of Roma J. Benjamin Ministries and Greater Faith Ministries. Folks, join us in the conversation. Post your thoughts, as we would love to hear what you have to say about the state of Black youth in America. I want to bring my panelists back in. Lisa, I want to get your take on what Dr. Clark just mentioned in terms of that level of investment. That's what the work that you're doing with Baltimore City Children and Youth Fund. You're talking about investing in the next generation, creating opportunities, essentially.
That's right.
But say it again, sis.
That's right. That's right. I'm just cheering you on. Yes, that's it.
Oh, okay. and it seems like when we're talking about creating opportunities, it seems like that can mean a lot of different things, right? Whether it's in the school system, whether it's in the community, regardless of where it is, creating these opportunities. Give us some ways for us to create opportunities. If the schools that our children are going to are deficient in some areas, do we continue to rally around some sort of political transformation to happen? Or do we start to move away from that old model and say we need to come up with a more community-oriented, culturally relevant form of investment for these children? Because I feel like we keep running this type of little wheel. Right, when we have these big conversations, people's like, "Oh, all we got to do is show up at the board meetings. All we got to do is show up at the PTA meeting." This is like, let's not act as if Black folks aren't involved in their community.
Right. Yes, Black people are very civically engaged. We all know that.
Right.
In terms of philanthropic dollars, even Black people give more than anybody else. Why?
Wait a minute, hold on. Let's say that again, because I want the people in the chat to hear that. Black folks give more than anybody else?
That's right. Black people give regardless of the economic place of our world. So if the stock market goes up or down, Black people still give. When do they give? Mostly at church, right? Mm-hmm. But they do give. They continue to give, and a lot of the money that they put into their church communities filters out into our communities. So Black people are givers. We know that because we're Black, but that's part of the way that we engage in the work. We give to each other. We sustain each other. Mutual aid comes from Black and Indigenous traditions. So philanthropy, American version of philanthropy, where basically wealthy people are hoarding their resources and doling them out in small doses to keep us placated, is not the kind of work that's going to move us forward. So this is really looking at the ways that Black and Indigenous people for all time have always made sure to pool and share resources to disperse to people who need it the most. I want to say, I'm so happy to hear about our conversation about education. I'm a career educator. I was an arts educator. And coming here to the fund, I left the State Department of Education, where I was the policymaker for arts ed. And what I can say with beyond a shadow of a doubt is, and you're talking about undervalued teachers, administrators, undervalued. And there's a blame game that happens too, right? We get into the space and we see that our children are hurting. I'm going to call on the research of my colleague, Larry Simmons, his Nobody Asked Me campaign, where he sat down with Baltimore City students and asked them for the first question about their experience growing up in Baltimore City, their experience as Baltimore City students. And the term that they have pulled from that research is that students report they are living in a sense of mundane terror.
Say it again. What's the term? I want us to put that into our vocabulary now.
Everyone needs to capture this. This is from the lips of young people. Mundane terror. They have become accustomed to living with in a high alert way, but it's become the typical way that they're used to being engaged with. They understand that when they show up in spaces on a city bus, in a store, right, that people are intimidated by them because they are young Black youth, whether they're about something good in that moment or not. They understand the way that they are perceived. They know that there are low expectations for them from the community at large, or that's what they perceive. And so I think when we hear that, that's a rallying cry to all of us, because none of us want any of our children to feel that way. None of us want that. So it's about the accountability that, or the sense of network that is created when we know our children are hurting. How can teachers, with kids are at school, families, because kids are at home, and the community all connect to protect and create a safety net around these young people so that they can traverse through, growing up is hard, traverse through childhood to youth to adulthood, knowing that we have their back. And so that's really I think the job of the adult community is for us to figure this thing out. And I think one of the things we can do is not misinterpret the other two spaces. School is a critical time in a young person's life.
That's right.
They spend most of their time at school.
Right.
Also, your family, right? This is a lifelong relationship that you're going to have. How can schools think about some of their job being to help families to be more productive and more healthy, right? And then how can the families support the schools? And then finally, that third space of community space. So many of us were lucky that we found adults in our community who engaged our passions, whether it was lacrosse or chess or reading or poetry, people in the community who brought and were generous with their gifts and talents and created third space for us to be safe outside of school and outside of school and home, a space for us to really thrive and grow and explore. Yeah. All three of those spaces have to be working collaboratively for young people to know that that the city has its back. And so that's what we're going to do here is to see more of that coordination.
And Lisa, I am so happy that you bringing up these points. Let me get a couple of comments from our online culture crew. Folks are checking in. Janelle, thank you as always for you checking in. You said we need to focus on getting the biggest amount of buy-in for our agenda, and that will take a coalition of people, not just Black people. You're absolutely right. And I want us to speak and I'm so happy that Elisa made this point in terms of understanding the eco space, Pastor Roma, that young people are operating in, that they have to go from school to home to community. And those are the three pillars of growth and development. These are the spaces that determine what type of human being that young person will grow up to be. The school space, the home space, and the neighborhood that they're growing up, the community that they're a part of. But we all know, and I want to get your take on this before we take our next pause, there's something that's been broken. There's something that's been broken. And if we also include the church and the faith space, right? These four pillars into what makes a community successful for developing and cultivating powerful young people of excellence. And if we can identify those four things as being the quote unquote ideals of what the environment we want young people to grow up in, then we can start to look back and ask ourselves the question: in every single community where Black folks are present, do you have a church? Is the school support? Is the school strong? Are the homes strong? Is there a sense of community within that? But something seems to be broken, Pastor. Talk to me about that.
And you know, and I really appreciate what Elisa just said, because a large part of the problem is some of the churches, you know, the most segregated day of the month is Sunday. And our churches are so separate. We go in so many different directions because we're trying to be more doctrinal instead of more human. We want to demand and dictate how a person lives instead of understanding these children. First of all, who come to school, some of them are they're the mother and father at home. They don't have a mother and father at home on a regular basis. So they're having to take care of the younger brother and sister. I had a student come in and we asked him what was his work. And when they brought him to me, I said, "Where's your work?" And he said, "It's on the table." I said, "Okay, we're going to call your mother." He said, "Well, my mother's a liar." So what do you do when a child looks at you? So we said, "So you say," he said, "Yes, my mother lies." And so when we spoke to the mother, she didn't know where the work was. He was not telling a lie. He was literally telling the truth. There was no support at home. So when we try to bring in the church and we try to bring in pastors, you know, pastors got to be a little bit more open because everybody's not going to join your church, but you have to have the door open. Everybody is not going to believe the way you believe, the way you preach, the way you lead, but you still have to have the doors open. Some doors are just open to feed the poor and to clothe, but there's more to feeding. There's more to clothing. And if we recognize, I wish pastors would get up and go into schools on a regular basis. How about they just come and walk down the halls and look at the children that go to their Bible studies? Children who go to their Sunday schools, who's totally different in the school system than they are in the church. So I agree, the four got to come together: the church, the school, the community, and the family. There has to be some type of connection that we're no longer judging, pointing the finger, saying who's right and who's wrong. You know what really baffles me is our children, they'll wear a $250 pair of sneakers. And the parents won't even invest in something like an arts education, or, you know, everybody think that their child got to go in the NBA or the NFL. And the opportunity to become a doctor is greater than getting in the NBA or the NFL. But they'll give them $250 pair of sneakers, but won't invest in a reading program. And your child's in the 8th grade and read on a 3rd grade level. That is a problem. But I really believe people like us, whoever said it takes more than Black people, you are 100% correct. It takes everyone to realize and recognize if we don't catch it soon, we're going to lose a generation, because the pandemic exposed the fact that we were not properly prepared to teach technology and virtual learning. We were not ready for it, even though we have technology. Now, I've been to Dr. Clark's school. His school is top notch. But when you go in some of these public schools, they are faking the funk. I'm sorry to say like that. They look
Pastor, I got
classes, but they don't have technology classes. You sitting there doing behavior things. If we would really dig into this and start from A to B to C to D instead of trying to jump it and make it work overnight, I believe that we could really change the paradigm in our cities, in our states, and in our churches.
And you know what? I got to take a quick pause on that, Pastor, because to get a next break in. But see, and this is the part, and I want us to have a part of the discussion is how do we make all of this relevant and real for the next generation? From Dr. Clark, the work that you're doing, education, where a young person feels like not only are they being educated, but they are becoming the educator. Same with you, Lisa. Like, we're talking about internalizing what arts mean, that they see themselves. I am an artist. I am a creative. And the same with you, Pastor. Like, for a young person to have a God consciousness, to have a spirituality, right? Because like you mentioned it before, you were kind of teaching the doctoral style, but not really cultivating in Islam, they call it the Tawa, the God consciousness of an individual, so that a child can turn that on or tap into that part of themselves, that when they're out among their friends, they can make solid decisions without being told, is it right or wrong? But they have a consciousness that is already rooted in something good and something necessary for them to survive out in the world. I want to talk a little bit about that. And of course, folks, we want to get more of your comments as we talk about the state of black youth in America right here on The Culture, here on the Black Star Network. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All the momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks. Welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm so happy to have my fantastic panelists as we've had a very big special conversation talking about the state of Black America, Black youth in America. Dr. Marco Clark, Miss Alicia Lee, and Pastor Roma Benjamin are all joining us as we have this conversation. And folks, I want to hear directly from you, my online culture crew, because so many of you are right in this spaces. I know that many of you are educators, many of you are working in the faith space, many of you are working in the art space, many of you are doing community development work. You're right there. So I hope that what's being said and what's being shared resonates with you, and more importantly, is inspiring us to keep the ball rolling. And I think, you know, Elisa, that's one of the big things about these conversations. I want to bring each one of you back into the discussion. That's one of the big things about this conversation is that we hear it, we have these discussions, but I'm talking about being inspired enough to fully internalize what we're hearing, what we're seeing, right? Because, yeah, you know, we can talk about the heroes and sheroes that came before us, right? And we talk about them all the time. We quote them, we bring them up into the conversations, we tap into their spirit, we use their vision for our professorial discussions about what Black people should be doing in America. But one of the key things that always stuck out for me, and Pastor Roma and Dr. Clark, I want to get your take on this as well. But Elisa, one of the key things that stuck out for me is that Dr. King, Dr. King, Malcolm X, Harriet Tubman, whoever you want to call out a role, they did not see themselves as being outside of the struggle. Mm-hmm. They fully internalized the struggle, and they made a decision that they were going to go all in or die for the struggle.
That's right.
They didn't, it wasn't, I'm in today, I'm off tomorrow. It was like, this is what I believe. This is the future that I want to put myself and sacrifice myself for. Therefore, I'm going all in. And the crazy part about all of the heroes and sheroes is that a lot of them were exposed to Black thought, Black consciousness at a very young age. Mm-hmm. So talk to us about how do we get to that place of internalizing this whole process? How do we get the next generation to not be on the outside, on the outskirts of change and revolution and liberation, but that they to the point where they can now say, I am change. I am the revolution. I am the liberation struggle.
I think that's the ticket, right? We've got to raise stronger young people. We've got to all be collectively working to make sure that young people are strong and strengthened as they grow. One of the ways that we're doing that in my current work is by thinking about, again, the heroes and the sheroes and the internalization of the struggle, the folks closest to the problem.
Come on, sis. Come on. I say it all the time. Come on now.
And so what we do at the Children and Youth Fund is we invest heavily in grassroots organizations because they are the folks from the community who looked around and said, hey, this is what I got to offer. Y'all want some of it? How can I help? Right? Not people who parachuted some solution from over yonder, but people who were there. Those are also the people who for decades have disinvestment, right? People who pop up. I love it when, when our wonderful principal said, to be honest, I just knew I could do it better. There's so much of that.
Come on, right.
And then those folks can't find the resources to sustain their solutions at the time. But those are the solutions that are transformative. Young Black people deserve to see in their community, not just in a history book, Black people having sovereignty over their own lives and communities. And so at BCYF, we're proud that our grant portfolio, 91% are Black and Brown-led organizations, when we know nationally the number is less than 4%, especially that pre-2020 phase, right? So when we put money and resources, when we put power and relationships, and when we put trust back into Black people's lives to determine the fate of themselves, I think that's when we see transformation occur. So we've got to, make sure that gatekeepers are not keeping the resources and keeping back knowledge so that people cannot make the kinds of transformations, because the solutions are already thought of. We just got to resource them.
Dr. Clark, my brother, how do we make this struggle? How do we make this reality, this future real? How do we make sure that the next generation are becoming internalized examples of what we want them to be, and more importantly, what we need them to be?
Well, first of all, my sister, Miss Lee, you said 91%. I'm gonna tap in and make that 92%. Get the other 1% over to Richard Wright. But the one thing I want to say is that we have to be, you're right, it's grassroots. We have to be a pipeline giver. And so as educators and as leaders, we got to build a network to come behind. I think part of what we have gotten away from in our community is that we stopped building leaders, and everyone went isolated in different places. And so for me, we've been in business and we've been pulling students along. When they graduate, they go to college and they come back and work for the organization. I have young people who are teachers, who are my IT, who are in charge of different things, so that when it's time for me to retire, that cycle can continue on and we can continue to build a bridge. We forgot what William Drumgo talked about as being that, that bridge builder. Being the bridge builder is important for us to make sure that we happen. And we forgot that for a time, and we're seeing the downfall of not creating that pipeline and keeping that pipeline going. And so it's up to us to make it happen. All of the work you mentioned, Malcolm, and we quote all of those historians, but what happened was the bridge fell apart. They were building people along and the bridge stopped. And now we see all the gaps and the challenges ahead. So we have to continue to put that bridge back in place and make it continuously happen.
I want to go to your point very quickly, Dr. Clark, because you said this in the past. I want to get your take on this question as well. But you're talking about building leaders. I've been doing leadership development work, whether in Baltimore and then now I'm here in Los Angeles. But building leaders seem to be one of those things, like a enigmatic process, right? Like when it comes to we know we build leaders in business. We know we can build leaders in politics. But I'm talking about building leaders that serve human beings outside of those spaces, outside of those realms. And what's the part of the process, or what is the things that we need to have in place to build community leaders and to make sure that people understand that just because you're a community leader doesn't mean that you are a second-rate leader. If you could bring people together in a community
That's
you
right.
could damn sure do some stuff in some of the more structured spaces.
Yes.
Well, I think that as we build leaders, right, you know, as we mentioned, it's grassroots. So you're on the ground. I'm on the ground in DC. I'm around. The community leaders, we come together. We have our monthly forums. We're continuously building an alliance around all of the work that needs to be done. We are identifying issues that's creating crisis in our schools, in our communities, in crime. And how do we get this bringing job readiness and all of this stuff together through an alliance? We're able to build this pipeline and I call building leaders because, as I tell students, I'm not building individuals to just go work. I'm building you to lead. Everyone can lead if they're willing to serve. And so the reality is that this is all about service. This is understanding that you're in a position to serve. And as you serve, you lead folks. People will follow you. This is a movement that we have to understand. Everything we do in a Black and brown community is a movement, because that movement is something that's going to require, it's going to create positive change. And that positive change is what moves us along. So I look at everything as building a leader. A community person is never second rate, because I'm going to tell you, the best friends you could ever have as a leader is the community leaders that can get on that ground and get that work done, because they can do things that you just cannot do. And they open up an avenue. So when you walk in the room, your voice will carry a whole lot because of those individuals who are out on the front line. I thank God for the community leaders and the soldiers that are out there in that community, because they get it done every single day. And they trust you to do the other stuff behind the scenes.
Hey, Dr. Clark, let me just say, when our brother Brandon, Mayor-elect Brandon Johnson of Chicago, he just got into office, and seeing where he was an educator. He came out of the teachers union space, right? And I posed the question right here on my show. I posed the question, should we start looking at civil servants as city leaders, right? Because the civil servants are, as Alicia said, and this is the old saying, you're closest to the problem, therefore you're qualified and to come up with the solution. And I'm looking at that, because a lot of times that model of rich white business people, or if you might be just rich, you could be Black and rich, don't work, man. It doesn't work for us anymore, because something is still not present in that person's experience. But when you might have a person that comes from the fire department or the police department or the school system, or they come from a community association, they come from a union, somebody that understands the struggle of people on the ground, they might be the best and most qualified because they understand the struggle. They understand the day-to-day realities of people. And I think that that point that you just made, brother, speaks volumes about where we need to go. Pastor, I want to give you that opportunity, talking about internalizing for the next generation. How do we make sure that our sons, our daughters, nieces, and nephews, and grandchildren internalize that they are the future? Not that we just saying it, but they actually know it, and they know it from a very, very divine source.
Right. And I always say that they're actually not just the future, they are the now, because we say future as if it's far away, but it is not far away. It's actually right now. And what Dr. Clark said about leaders, building leaders, when we build leaders, the leader's greatest return is a leader. So
come on, Pastor. Don't take me to church on no doggone Tuesday.
We're not just sitting up, just playing around. You're right. Those that are closest to the problem, they are our leaders. So we have a lot of students. I see a lot of my former students. Some of them are district magistrates. They're running for judge. They're trying to do stuff with city council. They're coming back within the city where they know they struggled the most and they have a voice. And we have to give them that voice. I always tell students, you're a spirit. You have a soul and you live in a body, but don't just focus on your body. You are a spirit. And so God speaks to us. He gives us ideas. He gives us witty ideas. Just like Alicia is saying, the foundation that she comes up with money with people who really need it the most, not those that are dangling $1 million. And then you got to jump ropes. You got to fill out 50 pages of something to get $1,000. That's a bunch of crap and garbage that we have thrown into the Black and brown community. No, we really need people to pour into leaders because they are our return. Dr. Clark, you're right. I'm supposed to be retired, y'all, but I tried to retire. I tried to retire, but they called me back. I have to. I said, I have to do this until I die. I cannot stop this until I die because we have a voice. It doesn't matter if we're talking to 1,000 or if we're talking to 1. We have to be able to affect and impact right where we are. And I'm so glad. Listen, I promise you, somebody wrote on here, it takes a village. Well, it takes a lot of villages, actually.
Absolutely. And that's my sister.
A lot.
Hey, that's one of my great sisters, and she's a great leader in here in the city of Los Angeles. Karen Connor, you said we are the village. What is broken? Yes. There is too much divisiveness within our communities. To raise powerful children, we must be like-minded and equally yoked. Children follow examples, good or bad. There it is. There it is. Look, I gotta let all of you go, but I want to kind of I'm gonna just ask one question. Y'all got 10 seconds to answer this question. Considering the state of Black youth in this country right now, do you believe we still have a bright future? Pastor Roma, what's your take on that? Yes or no, ma'am?
Yes, and we need to trust each other to help develop it. Yes.
All right. Elisa Lee, what's your take on? What's your answer to that?
Absolutely. Blackness is a wellspring of creativity, Black identity, and I believe if we don't solve it, the children will help us to solve it. So we got to work together.
Dr. Marco Clark, what's your take?
I believe we got a bright future because you can't beat a person who's determined to win. And we got to make sure that everybody's in the game. And we got to call out those who are not.
Yes.
There it is. Dr. Marco Clark, founder, CEO of the Richard Wright Schools, Miss Alicia Lee, who serves as the president of the Baltimore City Youth and Children and Youth Fund, and Pastor Roma J. Benjamin of Greater Faith Ministries. She is the founder of Roma J. Benjamin Ministries and Greater Faith Ministries. I thank each one of you for being on the show to have this conversation. I hope and pray that our watchers, our online culture crew appreciated this discussion, but I want to say thank you, not just for being on the show, but for the work that each one of you are doing today to empower the next generation. I know that this was just one of many conversations, but this is a national conversation. This is a community conversation. This is a necessary conversation that we need to have, and to have your brilliance, your expertise, and your insight means everything. Thank you to each one of you. Thank you for being so good for the culture. Thank you so much. I appreciate y'all. All right, folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, let's have a conversation about the WIN conference. I'm going to share with you what that is all about and how you can be supportive of that. Stay with us. It's the culture here on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punching!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland. Hey, Black, I love y'all. All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? Pull up a chair. Take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Farajii Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. What a fantastic conversation that we had talking about the state of Black youth in America. And folks, tell your friends and family about the work we're doing here on The Culture, bringing folks together, bringing voices together, having these very important and relevant discussions. Definitely tell them to check us out on the Black Star Network on our website at blackstarnetwork.com. And of course, so share the information and just continue to support us, man. This is exactly the type of discussions and, more importantly, the exactly type of platform that we need in this day and time. So again, go to blackstarnetwork.com. We're streaming on all social media platforms and, of course, on Amazon News. So big shout out to all of those who have been supportive of us thus far. Folks, for our final discussion, I want to talk about the WIN conference. Really, this is the WIN network. And this is a network that is focused on bringing together change makers to advance intergenerational health and well-being and equity. And they're having a 4-day conference that will be happening, the WIN Week 2023, Springing Forward to Long-Term Change. Here to talk to us about the work of the WIN network and what this 4-day conference will be all about is Dr. Somava Saha, who serves as the primary spokesperson for this dynamic gathering. Dr. Saha, thank you so much for joining us here on The Culture on the Black Star Network. How are you today?
I'm great. It's wonderful to be with you again. And
Absolutely.
It was so good to hear the discussion before.
Oh, absolutely. So glad to be connected to you once again. And let's talk a little bit about the WIN Network's 4-day conference, talking about intergenerational health and wellness and equity. This is big. And you're bringing some big folks together, some big change makers together. First and foremost, before we talk about the details of the conference itself, I want us to, just briefly discuss from your vantage point, Doc, what you're saying here in the cultural space of how we're having these conversations about health and wellness and equity, especially coming out of COVID. Now we're in an age where, I've been reading stuff from about insurance issues to issues about the medical system being, people are looking for healthcare to be changed and calling for a reform of the healthcare industry. I mean, we're in a very, very interesting time right now where people are starting to, I would say, for lack of a better word, starting to revolt against these long-standing institutions that have been serving as governors of our lives for so long, whose word we have always trusted. But now there seems to be some pushback on that. Are you seeing the same thing, Doc? We got Doc.
I do. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yep.
So first of all, I'm so glad you raised that, because in our work at Wellbeing and Equity in the World and the WIN Network, we knew at the beginning of this pandemic that the only way to begin to keep each other safe is to know that we had to restore trust. And that trust had to be based on first an acknowledgement of the harm that had happened in communities of color, in communities that have experienced inequities in their ways, in ways that reconciled with their history and acknowledged that. Second, that before asking for trust, actually showed trust. And so we worked with hundreds of communities around the world. And instead of asking the public to trust the public health system, what we did is we flipped that. We said, let's bring the public and make the public invite the public to be the public health system, to reconnect us, who we can be with each other. And so the gathering that's coming together for Win Week this time is communities across the country that's made up of youth and Black barbers and people who have been working to artists, activists, and health professionals, everyone coming together to say, we've been doing our part to mitigate the impact of the pandemic, and that's not enough, because what all of us have cared about for decades and have worked on for decades is to heal the underlying conditions that lead to health inequities. And that if we can't begin by really understanding what's happening in people's lives and in the lives of our communities and reconciling with that, if we can't be honest about those things, we can't ask for trust. And if we're trustworthy, what we need to do is show that, to actually move the money to where the pain is, and trust the leadership of those who are closest to the challenges. And then as we do that, to begin to say, how can those people, the people who are closest, actually lead the response, and what would they do? And what they showed us is that they could do brilliant things. They could not only get people vaccinated and protect their mental health, they could help them get connected to jobs and food. They could get prison rights expunged. Prison records expunged, even as they connected with what they needed for housing and rental assistance and policy change. And so this gathering is sense-making across hundreds of communities, all the way from the grassroots all the way to the grass tops, including federal leaders that are working across departments to say, how can we be connected on the ground, all the way to what major institutions need to do, to what federal departments need to do, to build a movement that is able to actually change the system.
And some people would say, Doc, that the movement really shouldn't be about changing the system, but maybe possibly setting up an alternative. Now, the healthcare system is huge in this country. It brings in a lot of money. It has a lot of people that work within the system. What's your take on that? Should we start to entertain an idea of an alternative healthcare, especially in light of what we're seeing in other countries around the globe? Especially when you're seeing that, in places like Cuba and other places where they have free healthcare. Canada has free healthcare. Like, do we need to fundamentally go that far down to change what it looks like for people to be taken care of?
I would not only say yes, it's what we've been working on for the last, 15, 20 years, where we actually changed the entire way healthcare is paid for large systems, and really supported people, a healthcare system that meets people where they're at and takes care of them in a whole person way. And what we've been able to show is that when you do those kinds of ways of doing healthcare systems in the US, you can substantially improve health outcomes and lower cost, even in Medicaid systems. But when I'm talking about changing the system, I'm not just talking about the healthcare system, because your health outcomes don't begin once you get to the doctor. They begin as a child. A kid that's growing up experiencing toxic racism or poverty is going to have a 40-fold higher risk of developing heart disease and diabetes, and that means they're going to be at much higher risk of dying of COVID.
So we're talking about changing some behaviors from our childhood, or from the future for the future of children.
No, I'm saying that we have communities that have been disinvested in. We need to stop blaming us, the people who are affected by poverty and inequities, and start like acknowledge, like let's diagnose the problem accurately. That's not what's diseased, is actually our structures and systems that are set up for some people and places it's not everyone, not reproducibly, to be set up to fail in terms of their health, in terms of their life, and in terms of their well-being. And that's why this gathering it's not a conference where experts are speaking to each other. It's about communities talking together, strategizing together, and say, if we really want to get rid if we really care about what the vaccination is, it's not just the COVID shot or a flu shot or something else. What we need is to invest in our belonging to each other, in our civic muscle, to actually change the system so that it protects all of us to be well, so that it restores extraction from communities of color and other rural communities, indigenous communities that have been experiencing that extraction for generations.
No, and it's talking about becoming more proactive rather than being reactive.
Yeah, that's real prevention. That's what public health is all about, right? But it's what I call deep prevention.
I love it. I love it. Doc, I got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, we're going to get more details about the 4-day conference of the WIN Network. And of course, folks, I want to hear your thoughts. So make sure you post your comments in our chat on YouTube and Facebook. And so, of course, stay with us as we continue to have the conversation about the Spring WIN Week here on The Culture, right here on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America. All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. We've been checking in with Dr. Somava Saha, who serves as the primary spokesperson for the WIN Network. And this network will be hosting a 4-day conference that's focused on intergenerational health, well-being, and equity. And they're not just having conversations among doctors and service providers, but they're having conversations with community members, community leaders, as well as industry leaders, to redefine and reimagine what healthcare looks like for us in this country. And I want to bring the doctor back in. Doc, we got a few moments left, but I want to give you a chance to talk about what folks can expect at these 4 days. The host community is Spartanburg, South Carolina. Is that correct?
That's right. We're so excited to be hosted by Spartanburg, because that's a community, one of the Wellville communities that's convening this together with us, along with Communities Rise Together in the WIN Network. And what they as a community have been doing is reconciling with their own history and saying, how does that reconciliation with what happened, for example, during urban renewal, or even further back, when the First Nations people were removed from their lands. How does reconciling that history help us understand our present? And then how does understanding our present help us chart a path to the future? So that first day of the conference will be about everybody coming in, because it's community, and community begins with relationship and food and joy. But then we are going to get serious on that first day to think about our past, not just in Spartanburg, but all across the country, and what it looks like when we can be honest about our past, to then say, how do we begin to chart a path that addresses that past? That second day will be all about looking at the present. How can we multi-solve? What if we could solve 3 problems at the same time? And what are the biggest opportunities? Like, if knowing that this is a year where ARPA funds will be allocated by the end of this year for the next 5 years, broadband funds are going out to communities. How can we begin to position ourselves across everything that we bring to address the underlying community conditions, or what we call the vital conditions, that are in the community level, that will then help to create the well-being of people? And then on the last day, it's all about how do we chart a path and build toward long-term change by building a grassroots to grass tops movement, one that's multiracial, multisectoral, and truly connects, intergenerational, and truly connects all the way from the grassroots community member to the federal leader to do business in a different way. And as we do that, communities will, for example, get to vote on what kinds of data should the federal government collect or not collect? What should they begin to, what's the priority about policies that would build a just and restorative well-being economy? How can we address structural racism in healthcare and public health? And what does it look like for us to think about that, not from the experts on the Hill or the industry insiders, but in a way that starts and is grounded in what communities that are experiencing racism and other inequities have to say about that?
That is awesome. That is awesome. It is such necessary work, Doc. And to see that there is a group of people, a coalition of folks that are doing this work at a very, very important and critical time in our country speaks volumes about the level of consciousness that is present right now. And I always push back. Folks say, well, people aren't doing anything. And it's like, no, you just don't know who is doing what. People are doing things on the ground level. And we're seeing more and more movements happening in this country right now than probably like ever before, where folks are saying enough is enough. I'm not going to sit on my hands and not do anything and just complain. I'm going to get involved. I'm going to do something. The WIN week will be kicking off on April the 24th. It will go all the way until April the 27th. Folks, you can definitely get more information, and also you can join them for their conference, this 4-day conference virtually. You can go to winnetwork.org. That's WIN network.org to get all of the details, to sign up for this virtual conference, and to be a part of the conversations around intergenerational health, wellness, and equity. And Dr. Samava, if we look at, what's going to be the big takeaway from this conference, what would you say for those who say, okay, we've come together a lot, but what's going to be the big takeaway piece? What would you say? What do you want people to walk away with after leaving this year's WIN Spring Conference?
When we got together 2 years ago, we figured out how we would move a federal pipeline of resources to communities and got 30 million into the hands of local leaders. It created 5,000 jobs and built a connected network of people. This time it's going to be about saying, if we're looking ahead in 2 years or 5 years, what are we going to be proud of that we can write to our children and our grandchildren? What are our kids going to do to define the future for who all of us are to one another? And I think what people are going to be coming into this is not just a spirit of celebration of all that's been accomplished in the last 2 years, but a spirit of possibility, of knowing that what we need to change the system is each other. And that if we're really together in that, we actually have the power to change the system.
There it is. There it is. That's inspiring for me. You just inspired me. You added to the conversation that we just had before you. So there it is right there, Doc. So I appreciate you. Dr. Samava Saha, thank you so much for your time talking to us about the WIN Network. And more importantly, talking about this 4-day conference. Again, folks, go to the website, winnetwork.org, winnetwork.org. And Dr. Soha, we will certainly love to have you back on to talk about some more of these issues, talk about the next gathering, all of that good stuff. So just trust and believe and know that you have a home with us here on The Culture, here on the Black Star Network. Thank you so much.
It's a joy to be with you.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you for coming in. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us. I hope and pray that you really enjoyed that. Did you? Big shout out to my crew. Yes, the conversation is happening right now. Make sure y'all do your due diligence and continue to support us, man. Because these are the discussions that we are having each and every day. Go to blackstarnetwork.com. That's our website. blackstarnetwork.com. Download the app for free. I downloaded it on my phone for free. And more importantly, share the content. Let people know. Also, make sure you subscribe to Roland Martin on YouTube and on Facebook and on social media, because especially on YouTube, when he goes live, it's so much different content. It's not just him as one person, but it's him as a network, him as a representative of a group of people that are doing fantastic work in this country. So make sure y'all tune in to Roland Martin's YouTube channel as well. All right. That's going to do it for us. Oh, make sure you follow us on Black Star Network on social media. Follow me. I can be found at The Real Farajii on Instagram and Farajii on Twitter. I would love to connect with you as we build this community. Okay, that's it. Stay tuned. Up next is Roland Martin Unfiltered, coming up at you at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But as always, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong. Stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. And God willing, we will be back tomorrow. We got some more great conversations. I'm going to check in with my sister Suzette Speaks. I'm going to check in with my man Scotty of Off Script Sports TV and so much more. So that will be happening on tomorrow's show here on The Culture. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a safe and blessed afternoon and evening. God willing, we'll check in tomorrow for another exciting edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Peace.